Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to your favorite political commentator who comes back only once a year, this time with a beard. Thank you so much for being continued faithful fans who have not given up on me over these past several years and me trying to figure out what I'm still doing with this channel. Anyways, I was listening to the Republican presidential debates because I really have nothing else to do with my life. And as I was sitting there, me as a libertarian, I just like to hate watch it. And I realized that conservatives don't really have a methodology. You're sitting there, you're watching Ramaswamy and DeSantis and Nikki Haley just duke it out who could scream the loudest. Basically, that was all that the first two were, and it was no different with the third, even though there was just less people this time around. It's the same kind of idea, the same song and dance, where they just want to continue yelling about who's a better conservative. But what is a conservative? We don't really know. We don't really know what a conservative is. It's really anything that liberals were 10, 15, 20 years ago. And there's not really an ideological foundation onto which they stand. And that's probably one of the biggest problems that I have with the modern GOP and conservative ideology today, because there's not really strong, stalwart stances on anything. It's just kind of whatever. And the Republican debates show exactly that. Because here's the thing, they're not debating to see who's going to be in first place. They're debating who's going to be in second place, who's going to be, on Trump's cabinet or whatever else. Because the reality is Trump leads even Ron DeSantis, the current second place guy, by 30, 40 points, right? So if Trump is having that much of a lead, we have to look at Trump's policies. But Trump doesn't even really have a ton of policies as to what he exactly wants either. It's, mainly just kind of, build the wall and, let's pretend, let's say I'm not going to blow out the budget, but then add 8 trillion to the debt. So what he says and what he does aren't exactly one to one. And that's the same thing for the Republican Party just in general. What they say they want to do and what they actually do are oftentimes two completely different things, and their voter base just seems to keep going along with it like that's perfectly fine and this is not something to be concerned about. I think the biggest thing that will help the Republican Party in this mess is finding ideological standpoints moving forward so that way they can actually have something to stand on. Because that's kind of the whole idea of the libertarian philosophy, is that they were, for guns and gay rights and marijuana 50, 60 years ago, and they've not moved from that position since then because that's just how they are. Whereas conservatives, liberals 20 years ago weren't for gay marriage. And then now here all of a sudden the conservatives are for gay marriage, because all conservatives do is just hold liberal points of view that were popular 20 years ago. And I'm not saying that your opinions can't shift and that your opinions can't change. But when you are trying to say that you're a principled person, especially, conservatives love to have the idea that they're the more moral ground, because oftentimes they're based in a Christian understanding, a Christian worldview. And so they hold to the idea that that gives them a moral superiority. And so with that, when they hold to that, it makes me confused as to why they keep shifting the grounds. Like, what is the philosophy in which you're going about it here? And they're not really willing to take any like hard stances on anything that's particularly super unpopular within their own party. Like, they're willing to be like, oh yeah, don't let trans people into bathrooms, but they're not really willing to like go too much crazier than saying like something like that. They're really content with being the status quo when it comes to rights, when it comes to freedoms, because right now the Republican Party isn't too focused on freedoms. They're just focused on not being liberal. And when your philosophy is based on not being something, that's how you get into another presidential race with Joe Biden and Donald Trump, because those two are men who don't stand for anything. They stand for themselves. They stand for their cabinet. They stand for their donors and everything else in between. They don't stand for the American people. And until Americans can get behind this idea, we're going to keep living in this state of limbo where parties don't really know what they believe. They just duke it out and scream at each other until one person's left standing. And I don't think that's a sustainable political philosophy. And so my idea is to throw in ranked choice voting. That's my philosophy, and I'm talking to people within my Maryland governance to kind of push for that idea. Is it going to work? I don't freaking know. Probably not. But the reality is, you don't know until you try. And ranked voting is the only system, I believe, to actually have true, genuine, a true, genuine look at what the people want. Because sure, you can go into a voting booth and mark Donald Trump or Joe Biden or whoever the frick else is running, but that does not show if that person doesn't get it, what else would you prefer? Because having this idea of it's black and white, red versus blue political philosophy, as we see online, has not exactly done well for the unity of the United States. And I think that's the only way we can really get back to that is we have a voting method in place that allows for this dialogue and allows for different decisions other than just your primary. Because if you are just, hanging on by the edge of your seat, the good guy or the bad guy wins, and the other guy wins, you just now have a right just to blow stuff up. And I don't want to get to that point. I don't want to get to that point. I think we need to have a system in place that can be better suited for other philosophies and other ideologies rather than just start blowing stuff up. But the political elite don't want that because they want to maintain their own power and they want to continue to divide us because as long as we, the people, are divided, we're not united against them. And if we're not united against them, we can't do anything about them. So push for your local elections to be held in ranked choice because that is really the only way in which things can actually change. And even if it's not ranked choice, even just having multiple votes, I'm okay with that system as well. But just having one person, one vote really, really does not work well. And there's a video I'm going to pin in the description specifically about that you can watch. So again, just your, crusty old libertarian uncle going on his ramblings again. But just from what I'm seeing, as a libertarian, I tend to lean more conservative, and I just don't see anything good coming out of the conservative movement or out of the Republican Party because we're just stuck in this cycle of we're just not going to be that guy, and we point our fingers to whoever we currently dislike, and that's just not a sustaining philosophy.